place like the Cube. Family, welcome to our Feed Swap Friday of the month. This month, we are featuring the podcast, I'm Feeling Queer Today. Child, I be feeling queer every day, but this pod is called I'm Feeling Queer Today. This podcast is part of the work coming out of the Future Perfect Project, where their goal is to amplify the voices of queer youth. What's going on? We got Sam, we got Alex, we got Julie in the building. Hey, y'all. Julie, I want to start with you because there's a lot of people who may not know what the Future Perfect Project is. And so I would love for you to just give everybody the 411 on that.
Yeah, I'd love to give some background. So we've been in existence for about 7 years. The organization was co-founded by the same person that co-founded the Trevor Project, which most people know, the 24/7 hotline for queer young people who are in crisis, Celeste Lacine. And Celeste had met up with a singer-songwriter by the name of Ryan Amador, a queer performer. I don't remember where they met, but they both struck up a friendship and talked about their experiences. Ryan on tour, Celeste doing different appearances at schools and stuff. Celeste was also a theater performer and had a one-person show. And noticing that the queer youth they were meeting were different than any other generation of queer youth that they had met before, that what was coming out of the mouths of these young people was very, very based in social justice and activism and autonomy and really understanding themselves in a way. I know for myself as a young queer person, I was not in touch with that. I was so busy keeping the closet doors closed. So it grew out of that. Celeste and Ryan started doing different workshops. They were like, let's see what these kids have to say through the lens of art. So what we do at Future Perfect Project is we offer free arts programming to queer youth all over the country. We do a bi-monthly writing workshop. We have this podcast that we've created, which is all done over Zoom. We're about to take it on the road for season 3. We also have a program called Future Perfect Records that we pay all of these young people too, which is a really nice part of our model. All the producers of the podcast have been paid. We have a record label called Future Perfect Records, all young queer artists, up and coming. We help produce their music and get them distribution rights. But I think the bread and butter of what we started with was just these small group discussions with young queer people, getting a chance to really tell their stories. And true storytelling is a lot what we're based on, and trying to help young people also develop themselves as artists and encouraging them to know that you have something to say and it's important and it's beautiful. And all of it's free and we're very happy about that. Yeah, we're just putting our tentacles out there and doing the good work.
Definitely doing the good work. I had no idea you all were doing all of that. I started doing my research. I'm like, man, they busy. Okay. And I love the fact that you're also paying young people for their time and their energy and their talents. I think that's really dope. And so, Sam, I know you are a producer of this podcast. So I would love to hear how you got involved and why you got involved.
Well, yes. So I got involved, I believe, November 2022. It was my senior year of high school. Around that time, my teacher sent me the link to the Playbill application, and I was like, OMG, because when I was in middle school, I used to dream of being on a podcast where I could talk about queer issues and Black issues, because there was things that were always very important to me. So I jumped on it. And I've been creating ever since I was in middle school, but I've never had a platform for these ideas and these patterns that I've noticed that happen to a lot of queer youth, a lot of queer Black youth, a lot of Black youth. And it's important to me to have this platform as a queer Black person, because a lot of times in Black spaces, the queer voice is kind of silenced, and in queer spaces, the Black voice is kind of silenced. And I believe that because I sit at the intersection, my voice is very important, because there aren't that many people like us at the intersections to speak for the people like us. And so it's especially for the little kids that are like me, that needed somebody to look up to, because I didn't have that many people to look up to with a platform who were going through the same things as me. So I just wanted to be that.
And you doing it. And y'all doing it with this pod.
Yeah.
I think that's so dope. And I think one thing you said was that it was something you wanted to do since you were a little kid. And I think it's interesting when these spaces are created because you just never know who you're going to impact or who it's going to reach. And so the fact that they wanted to start something allowed for your dream to come true. And I think that that's pretty cool. And then we got Alex in the building, and Alex,
Hello.
you actually hello, and you actually co-produced the episode that people are going to hear on our feed today, or whenever they tune in. And so you actually co-produced this one. The title of this one is called "The Label Game."
Indeed, it is.
And so I would love to know while y'all were putting this episode together, what were things that were important to you all? Why did you all want to talk about labels and how that's impacting queer youth today?
Well, as Julie stated, there is something about like this generation, my generation of queer youth, where we have a lot of access to information and concepts that I feel like previous generations, they laid the groundwork, but it's like, it's a relatively new concept to just be able to like go out there or like open up your phone and like be introduced to all these concepts and like experiences of queerness. And one thing that I've noticed a lot is that people are finding solace in labels. And that's something that I find incredibly beautiful, but it's also like not a universal experience. That's one thing about queerness is that there are like all kinds of different ways to experience it. Like some people like lean towards certain labels, some people don't want to label themselves, and I don't think that like either of those people are less queer than the other. And yeah, I found that when we were recording this podcast, we definitely had a lot of experiences and like unique relationships with labels and just the different ways that people can connect or feel disconnected from them, especially when intersectionality becomes like part of the picture. Like queer people of color probably have different experiences, and like disabled queer people, speaking as a disabled queer person, have different experiences. And yeah, we're very privileged to have like youth from all kinds of backgrounds and walks of life and experiences who perhaps as a result of that, or perhaps as a result of different experiences entirely, have different relationships with labels. And at the Future Perfect Project and on I'm Feeling Queer Today, this concept that we worked with was speak from the I, which basically means like speaking from our own experiences and not trying to like make those seem realer or more legitimate than others. So yeah, that's one interesting thing about I'm Feeling Queer Today is you could hear two people come to entirely different conclusions about what labels work for them or what like terminology they use or what they feel comfortable with, and both of them are equally right. And that's kind of how I feel about the concept of the label game as a queer, non-binary, disabled person.
I love this. Child, people tried to find labels for me when I was coming out. I was like, what are you talking about? I was so confused. They'd be like, oh, no, you're not a stud. You're like a soft stud. I'm like, I'm a soft what? And I just had no concept for any of this. And then these labels begin to inform how you show up in the world because these are these expectations that people have now put on you based upon however they see you in the world. Sam, I'd love to hear, how have labels impacted your lived experience? Alex talked about the intersections. I mean, and you mentioned that too.
This is a great time to talk about this. A few months ago, I was talking to my therapist, and I was saying like, you know, I'm a boy. Like I think like I use he him pronouns, but like I would say maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I put on my Instagram he she they. And I just changed it in my bio, didn't say anything about it. And a few months later, like I posted and I was like, yeah, these are my pronouns and preferred pronoun order, whatever. But then last year, I was talking to my teacher about it, and I was like, yeah, he, she, they. And he was like, no, you're not. Like, you're not. Like, no, you're him. Like, look how you dress, look how you act. Like, you're him, you're one of the boys. I was like, okay, well, I guess, whatever. And I think it was like something I dealt with a lot was trying to figure out what my label is, and am I a boy, am I non-binary, whatever. I talked to my therapist, and I was saying like I feel as though it's am I being disrespectful, like saying that I don't identify as a boy because I do not live the what we think the trans experience is, and like I feel comfortable in my body, but like I also don't really feel like one of the boys. I don't want to be one of the boys. This is something talked about in my episode about queerness in black femininity. It's like when I was growing up, I was ostracized from the boys, and I wanted to be one of the boys so bad. But also, I really didn't, because I wanted to hang with the girls. I wanted to sing and dance, and the boys was playing basketball. And like hello, ill playing basketball is boring. And then also when I was younger, I had an afro, and I wore wore a lot of my stepmom's clothes, and she was also a stud, but like she was just so like the clothes were not boy clothes, but they were like, I thought they were cute, so I wore them, whatever. And people a lot of time, I also had like a pretty high voice, and I was I was feminine, and so people thought I was a girl often, and it used to upset me very, very deeply, because a lot of times it was also like veiled homophobia, and like it was like supposed to make me feel bad. As as I'm older now, like I'll throw on a crop top, and like I be feeling it. The other day I put on for my acting studio, I had to put on a button up and slacks, and I felt like I was getting in drag. And this is not me. But I was like, I feel kind of cute though, but like this is not me. Like what is this drag? Hello. Um, and I'm still trying to figure out what the label is. I recently read that you can be non-binary, so I identify as a man. Like a lot of times, like at the like two straight men that I'm friends with, like I'd be like, I'm a lady. Y'all talk about that boy stuff. I don't know what that boy stuff is. I'm a lady. Hello. But sometimes when they're like talking about like the boy stuff, like video games, which I do like, and like certain sports I do like to watch, not to play, but I do like to watch. um it's like I kind of feel like on the outside a little bit. I'm like, I don't know why I feel why do I want to be included on that? And it's like it's something that I'm still trying to figure out. And like, to wrap it back around to labels, it's like being a queer person is being asked questions about your identity all the time. Ever since before I even identified as before I identified as a queer person, people were asking me questions about who I was. I didn't always have the answers. And like, also being an advocate, sometimes I like to educate, but I have to know the answers to the questions that people are asking to educate. And it frustrates me to not have the answers about myself, or not have the words or the labels to put on myself. And like it kind of sucks. But like also it's like I'm also just me. And yeah, like I like the labels are nice to have, and I think that they're also the fostering community having a label. And I think like it's also how what intersectionality is based on, if our labels match. But sometimes it's like you're just you and I'm just me. And like my like I don't know, like for the first time yesterday, literally yesterday, last night, I used term non-binary as a as a referring to myself. I was like, okay. But also I'm a man, because like I was socialized and I grew up a man, and I feel nice in my male body. And as an actor, like I do a lot of pieces that are written for women. Like I sing a lot of songs that are like written for women or the female voice, and I change the key, and like I feel very affirmed. But I don't know. It's like
I think that's okay. And I think that might be the idea behind this episode in its totality. And also saying, I appreciate you sharing your story and your journey, because child therapy saves lives. Okay. Save
it
mine.
does.
Right.
Okay.
And so working through your process, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it is a process. And I say, don't rush your process. It's going to be what it is. And Alex, when putting this episode together, what are you hoping that young people, and even the people going to listen to it on this podcast feed, get out of listening to this episode? What do you hope is the message they receive?
I hope that the message they received is that there are so many ways to be queer and to relate to or not relate to labels. Like, that's the one thing that we keep coming back to. There is no single right answer. There's no way to get like an A+ on being queer, whatever that means for you. Like, I'm a non-binary lesbian. Some people don't really get that, and I try to explain it to the best of my ability. Some people are open to listening to it, some people aren't. That doesn't impact my legitimacy as a queer person. I'm still a non-binary lesbian, whether people say that or not, whether people agree or not. And like, yeah, the non-binary experience, the lesbian experience, really any kind of queer experience, it means different things to a lot of different people. Like, some people look at me saying my lesbianism affects my gender, and they're like, well, that's not the truth for me. I'm a lesbian and I'm happily cisgender. And it's like, well, good for you. I find that my experiences as a lesbian really alienated me from womanhood, and I don't identify as a woman because of that and other factors like gender dysphoria and how my neurodivergence impacts how I perceive gender. Like, there really just are so many experiences, and I feel like as long as you're not hurting people, then none of them are really wrong. Like, yeah. Like I said, the label game, there might be stories that come to different conclusions. Some of them might be contradictory. I don't know. It's been a while since I've listened to the episode, admittedly. But, like, yeah, just take what resonates is kind of the vibe. But don't like, trash on what doesn't, I guess. There is no wrong answer.
I love that. And Julie, as you sit here, you wanted to, I was coming to you right now.
What you got. One thing I wanted to say that I think, this podcast is for queer youth, but it's also for people who want to understand and learn more about the queer experience, who might not be on board, who might have a child that just came out and they're like, what is this all about? For me, as the adult in the mix, and I'm 51 actually. So when I first started working with queer youth of this generation, for me, it was a little confusing because sometimes we'd have a Zoom and somebody would show up one day as, Sam, and the next day they'd come to a workshop and they were maybe Bill with like different pronouns and what I've realized is that some people in my generation look at all these different labels and all these, chosen names and all these things as a sign of confusion, but really it's a sign of curiosity. That these young people get to experience because of the work that queer elders have done. I think, too, that one of the things that comes across really strongly throughout the episode is this idea of fluidity, that some young people, Wallace and Eric in particular, who are at the beginning of the episode being interviewing each other, they're like, I was going to choose a label, but why bother? Because it's probably going to change. So I thought that was a really interesting piece. I wonder if like Sam or Alex wants to talk about that phenomenon, because it seems to be they both were very much wanting to reject any kind of box because they were like, then that's all people are going to see me as. So kind of just like that exploration to me is a big part of this episode too, that I think will be really cool for people to hear who are confused about like, what are these kids doing? And it's like they have freedom. They're figuring out who they are.
And I think to your point around older generations, you say curiosity. The first thing that came to me was freedom and liberation that we did not have. Right. And I think it is something scary when you see that people are free and that people are liberated to live outside of the labels. So, Julie, if people want to support the Future Perfect Project, how can they do that?
If anyone wants to support what we're doing and support this great work and keep this podcast going, you can go to thefutureperfectproject.org. At the top of the page, there's a button that says donate. You can also go to our About Us page. You can find ways that you could volunteer, get involved. So yeah, all you have to do is go to thefutureperfectproject.org, and you can find us on social media at The Future Perfect Project across platforms. Check out what we're doing. We could use all the support we can get. So yeah, check out thefutureperfectproject.org.
All of that of what Julie just said. And now we're going to actually play this episode, The Label Game. I hope that y'all enjoy it. Actually, you should enjoy it. You should be looking forward to it after hearing this dope interview with Julie, Sam, and Alex. So get ready to enjoy The Label Game. And when you get done listening, go subscribe to their podcast, I'm Feeling Queer Today. And then you're going to listen, and then you're going to rate and review and give it all 5s. Okay? And I know y'all going to do that. So thank y'all for coming on, and family, enjoy the episode.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Woo.
Woo.
My name is Eric Eubank. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 17 years old, and I live in La Crescenta, California. I think it's important that we, whether it's through the creation of a podcast or individual writing pieces or really any way to portray any part about you or your experience, I think it is so important and really like vital, just because it shows the most vulnerable parts of you. In that vulnerability, we find a lot of relatability. So I hope that even my small contribution to this pod will be valuable for someone else, because maybe the vulnerability that I'm sharing, even if it just scratches the surface, will kind of tap into a shared experience with them, and we can connect on some level, even if it's not face to face.
Woke up on the right side of the rainbow, feeling bright, gonna put on a good show. There's a skip in my step, I'm doing my best, and I guess that you could say I'm feeling queer today. I'm feeling queer today.
Hello there, I'm Lily Muller.
And I'm Alex Massey, and welcome to I'm Feeling Queer Today, a podcast that amplifies the voices of queer youth. This is episode 2, The Label Game.
For some LGBTQ teens, finding people that they can see themselves in is an invaluable part of understanding their own sexuality or gender. One of the biggest things that helped me find myself was finding people I looked up to, related to, and felt safe with. I have used a great many words in my time to describe myself, and many LGBTQ people favor having as many labels as necessary to describe their unique groupings of traits and experiences. As Maddie G. and J.R. Zuckerberg point out in their whimsically illustrated A Quick and Easy Guide to Queer and Trans Identities, quote, "The main purpose of self-identification is to foster community and counteract feelings of confusion, otherness, and shame, and to connect with others who share similar experiences." End quote.
Although using labels to describe our sexuality can help us find solidarity in a heterosexist world, labels can sometimes exclude people, limit their growth, or make them feel boxed into one category. Labels can also be especially harmful when they're forced onto someone who doesn't want them. Throughout this episode, we explore the idea of labels as validation, but also the notion that it is okay to explore which ones really fit and how that can change from month to month, week to week, or even day to day. And that's okay. We're all constantly growing and changing.
At the top of the episode, we heard from one of our participants, Eric, from California, about how they hope that this podcast can be a way to connect people on a deeper level, even if it's not face-to-face. In that respect, Eric got a chance to chat via Zoom with another one of our young producers, Wallace, from upstate New York, about how they both navigate labels, identities, and stereotypes.
My name's Eric. I am in California. I'm 17.
I'm Wallace. New York is where I am right now, and I'm 16.
For me, I feel like queer is my favorite word to describe myself, just because it says I'm not who you expect I am. I'm not necessarily how I present. I am a little more complex than that, because I feel like my gender and my sexuality are both very like fluid. How would you describe your identity if you have a concrete way to do that?
I don't know. It sort of goes all over the place. I'd say I would fit under like the trans umbrella, I suppose. And in terms of like sexuality, I've never really put a name to anything, just because what's the point?
Exactly. I feel like it's nice to just know, because just for yourself to be like, this is what I feel comfortable with. But at the same time, it's like, we're just people. Labels, who cares?
Yeah. I feel like at some point labels got so performative, and they got very much for everyone else versus for yourself.
Yeah.
The whole point of having labels was supposed to be to give yourself that stability while trying to figure things out. And as soon as everyone kept being like, what are you? I just lost interest in trying to label myself, because if you only see me as the label, it's very limiting to who I am.
I think that finding those labels can be like, this is what I'm outwardly presenting, but it's almost always so much more complex than that. I know I've reached point B. I have the conclusion of like who I am and how I identify and how I feel about that. But at the same time, that's probably going to change anyway. So arriving at that point, it's still just a midpoint to get to somewhere else.
Yeah. It's the same with pronouns, because as nice as it is that people are like, oh, what are your pronouns? They instantly assume that your pronouns equals who you are. Whereas I might not always be like, oh, my pronouns are this, and that directly correlates to this. Because people will be like, oh, he, him, okay, man. And it's like, I don't know if that's always true.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, there are different aspects of identity and expression, and everything is a spectrum, and the spectrums don't have to align. But there is this kind of phenomenon of, well, this is what you're going to express yourself as. That means you are this. But that's not true. And I feel like for me, I would say I'm comfortable with any pronouns, like he, she, they, anything would be fine. But if I were to tell someone that, a lot of people would just be like, oh, you're fine with he? Well, you were born male. We're just going to call you he. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm asking.
That's my issue too, because as much as it's like I really don't care, bottom line, as soon as I say that, everyone's just going to take the easy route. And it's like, no, I'd like for you to put in an effort.
Yeah. And I think that boils down to the binary perception that we have of gender.
A lot of people find comfort in labels where it's like, oh, feminine people do this, masculine people do that. Everything that's very stemming from sexism and patriarchal ideas.
I feel like there's a lot of nuances and complexities that can't be encapsulated by labels and things. I like having a menu of options that you get to pick from. It's like a build your own kind of thing where you can just have the different aspects of yourself, and you can have any combination or any way that's visually expressed versus the way you act versus how you just internally identify. There shouldn't be boxes to check, rather it's just kind of a more fluid, ambiguous kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest change, I guess, that is necessary is just people being more open to what isn't necessarily traditionally X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I think dismantling of a lot of traditional values would be good, as much as people don't want to hear that. It's kind of needed in order to break away from all of the BS that we have going on in the world presently. It's just hard to be queer these days with all of the traditional people that are like, this doesn't work. And it's like, okay, but no one's asking it to work for you. It's working for other people.
I mean, even for people who are or claim to be very supportive and everything, a lot of times there's a perception of what something should be. We're all kind of guilty of having certain assumptions that are limiting and that do put people in boxes. And I think there needs to just be some collective agreement, we're going to stop doing that.
I mean, they're stereotypes for a reason, because sometimes they're true, but it's also just let me be a person outside of what you've picked out for me.
Based on the way that I walk and talk and act and speak, the assumption for me is gay man. That's kind of the prescribed label, I guess. But I think that not only is my gender more complicated than that, that's just not necessarily an experience that I 100% identify with. There are overlaps, definitely, but that isn't necessarily encapsulating as me as a whole. So I would definitely say that when the label is thrust upon you, even if you don't have an alternative, even if you aren't sure what is better, don't just settle for less. Don't just be well, this is what I was told, so I'm going to have to accept that.
Yeah, something I would recommend is just to take time, because a lot of people will be you need to know, and it won't work out that way. You have to take time and sit through it and not deny yourself just the ability to process things, because a lot of people are going to be oh, are you sure, blah, 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 but just stick with it, and whatever happens, happens, because you will forever evolve and change as a person. It's part of life.
And also, definitely don't feel pressured to reach a conclusion about anything, because that conclusion's probably going to change at some point.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There's no rush for anything.
There's no endpoint. It's just forever going on.
It's okay to experiment and be who I am and change how I feel about myself.
Honestly, I love this piece. I love what Eric said about how you shouldn't settle for a label either. there is that fear of being wrong, whether it does come from that like homophobic, transphobic implication of, oh, this is just a phase.
And what if it is? We've all gotten like a weird haircut. We've all gone through like an overall moment. We've painted our walls teal. And in all, like, people over time, we age, we have partners, we have new friends, we get new jobs, we move places. We're not 4 years old forever and ever and ever. And we accept change in those avenues of life, but for some reason not in the avenues of gender and sexuality. And that's always really confused me.
A lot of people want to explore all facets of their queerness. In this next segment, we're going to hear audio taken from the Future Perfect Project's original series, Queer Youth Animated. In this clip, we meet 13-year-old Benny from Kingston, New York. Stuck at home during the pandemic, Benny finds comfort and connection through texting with friends and finally names what they've been feeling about their sexuality for a long time. Honestly, I think this has the potential to be a wonderful period piece for this generation of queer folk. Let's take a listen.
My name is Benny. I'm 13 years old, and I am in New York. And I identify as pan. I always just, assumed that I wasn't straight. I kind of just knew when I had crushes on Disney princesses instead of the Disney princes. But then one of the things, in real life, that made me realize was this girl who I had a crush on in the 5th grade. When they came out as non-binary, I was like, oh, well, I still find you attractive and I'd still, date you. So I was like, okay. And then one of my friends who kind of just, has been trying to find their label for a while, I asked for them to explain, what the sexualities were, and they did. Great friend. And I was like, oh, wait, I think I might be pan. And then I kind of just stuck with that. I haven't figured out anything else that might work better for me. The gayest thing about me is probably just my personality and the fact that I can't go 24 hours without talking about some LGBTQ person that I find attractive or questioning my identity in multiple different ways. That's probably due to having more time to look into identities during the pandemic. My friends, we've kind of just been all experimenting with names and pronouns, and it's just been really exciting to have that space. A majority of our conversations being text messages definitely makes that easier. My favorite part about being queer is really just the boldness and how everyone has out their styles because they're allowed to express themselves. On the internet, I see people who are wearing crazy things like Rubik's Cube earrings, which are really cool, and gigantic dresses and crazy nail designs. And it's really inspiring, and I try to put that into my outfits as well. And I have these crazy worm earrings that me and my friend have a matching pair of. We coordinate our accessories sometimes. Just be like, hey, guess what? I'm also part of this wild and bold community.
That was absolutely darling. I love that these are conversations that this generation can have. And I know so many people who are always like, queer people make their whole personality being queer. But there's just something so euphoric about being young and having that first chance to explore and express yourself. It's literally not hurting anyone. You'll learn so much, whether it's just what makes you comfortable or how to make your own earrings.
I had a challenging multiple coming outs. So now as an adult, I've definitely had positive experiences, but it warms my heart to hear that people's first hop in is going to be positive, because even if your progressive experience become positive, in the back of your mind, there's sometimes just always going to be something nagging.
So what do we have next on the docket, Lily?
Another edition of Queer Crushes, this story coming from Zorian Edwards in Pennsylvania.
So my first queer crush was on one of my best friends. This is pre-transition, pre-knowing that I was trans at all. I'm just gonna call her Bobby. So Bobby was a more masculine kind of girl. She was more of a tomboy than I was. She was obsessed with horror movies and zombies, and kind of the opposite of how I was at that age. I don't even know how to explain it. She was just a really nice person, and I started to have a crush on her. And around this time is when I realized what bisexuality was and the fact that I was bisexual, so I came out to my friend group at the time, which most of them weren't really supportive. Some of them thought it was like a trend. So I was like, well, no, I'm not faking this. Like, I'm genuinely bisexual and I'm looking for some support here. I remember that Bobby was the only one that was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And that was the most support I really got. I was going in and out of the closet here. And Bobby and I became closer friends. Then I invited her to my birthday party and we had a sleepover and stuff. And I wanted to tell her I had a crush on her, but I was too scared to do it. So anyway, Bobby, you know who you are. But that was my first queer crush. And then I guess the other half is like, after I transitioned, I was like, oh, well, I must just be straight because I'm a guy now. So I guess rediscovering that I was bi was when I had this huge crush on this very smart guy that was in the grade ahead of me. He was the smartest kid in his grade, and he seemed pretty homophobic at first. And then he joined my Pride Alliance, so as time progressed, I started to discover that he was more feminine than the average guy. We dated for like 3 months, so I was like, oh, well, I must just be gay. And then once I got out of that relationship, it was like, no, I'm most certainly bisexual because women are women and non-binary people are non-binary people. Everyone's hot, okay?
Just such a lovely piece because I think that it shows just how exploring your gender and exploring your sexuality can be so linked. They're kind of complementary journeys. Sometimes they're not always totally in sync, but like, I don't know. I feel like you find yourself by the end usually.
I'm taking the less deep route. Crush on the Best Friend, seminal, rite of passage. It's a classic. Like in any given room of queer people, you'd be like, who here has developed feelings for a close friend? The hands will go up. They will soar into the sky.
And now, folks, we're going to round out this episode hearing from Frankie about their queer identity journey. Here we go.
My name is Frankie, and I use they, them pronouns. My current labels: gender nonconforming, transmasculine, and bisexual. I first came out as pansexual when I was 15, I believe, and that quickly morphed into gay, which at some point reverted to bisexual. I think I came out as non-binary when I was 16. Something that I've realized lately is that labels have always just been a means to an end for me. They are simply descriptors to get me where I need to go. Now I feel like I use terms like transmasculine as a way to medically transition and go on testosterone. But I feel like once I'm comfortable with myself, that label is gonna fade away and I'm just gonna be myself again, if that makes much sense at all. Same with bisexual. I don't feel like that's necessarily a term that has much power, except for that it describes to other people the kind of people I like to date, and that is subject to change at any point. So I feel like as it pertains to how my past experiences inform my current labels and my current experience, they are always to get me somewhere else that I want to be. And once I get to that point, the label changes, or I just go back to feeling like I don't need a label.
That's just such an absolutely lovely segment. And I think that it offers a pretty fresh perspective on how to explore and attach yourself to identities. Like this idea of just, does it get you where you need to go?
I've said it before, I'll say it again. I want to be Frankie when I grow up, and I really do mean that. Because I'll have to be well into old age to be so wise and introspective. I appreciate the idea of labels as opening a door. Like, I think when I was first understanding that there was something gendery happening, it occupied like 98% of my brain all the time. Like, I couldn't like relax. And now I feel like a sense of security that I feel like Frankie gives off in general, but in this clip of like, I know who I am and I don't need to be able to explain that detail by detail to other people. But also the quotation, the label's gonna fade away and I'll just be myself again. I write poetry, so sometimes things just make my entire body like, so that's where I'm at today. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Frankie. We appreciate you so much.
Overall, just such a wonderful way to kind of close up the episode by bringing it back to like a queer identity journey. And if there's one thing that I've learned about being queer, it's that some of us love labels, some of us don't need them. And I think that's really cool.
I'm very pro whatever word makes you comfy. But now there's even more.
I don't know. I don't feel like anyone needs to be a walking dictionary or glossary of it. I think that just being able to like understand and respect, that's enough, you know? Like, you don't need to know everyone's nuance and stuff. And sometimes people don't feel safe sharing all of that. But I think that just being able to like have access to those things can help you understand your gender so much better, or your sexuality, or both. Anyways, this closes out the second episode of I'm Feeling Queer Today. And we really hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to joining you again. And I'm Alex.
I'm Lily. And you've been listening to
I'm Feeling Queer Today.
Be sure to join us next week for episode 3, where we explore the topic of intersectionality with hosts Wallace and Sam. And if you like what you hear, please rate us and share the show with your friends or family, or both. And don't forget to ask yourself, how am I feeling queer today? For more information and resources about this episode, check out the show notes, or visit the episode page at thefutureperfectproject.org/podcast.
If you or a young person you know between the ages of 13 to 24 is currently in crisis, check out thetrevorproject.org for LGBTQIA+ specific support through text and chat, or call 1-866-488-7386. We will also include this information in the show notes as resources.
To learn more about the Future Perfect Project and all of our free arts programming for LGBTQIA+ youth, visit thefutureperfectproject.org or find us on social media at The Future Perfect Project.
I'm Feeling Queer Today is produced by the Future Perfect Project with support from Radio Kingston, WKNY, AM 1490, FM 1079, Kingston, New York. This episode was produced by me, Alex Massey,
and me, Lily Muller, as well as Frankie Gunn and Wallace, featuring Benny, Eric Eubank, and Zorian Edwards.
Our theme song was composed and performed by me, Alex Massey, and produced by Emma Jane Slaslowski. Additional music composed by myself, Frankie Gunn, and Epidemic Sound. Episode mixing and mastering by Julie Novak, with assistance from Emma Jane Slaslowski.
Special thanks to executive producers and mentors, Julie Novak and Celeste Lacine,
as well as Future Perfect Project team members Ryan Amador, John Wan, and Dalia Jamil.
If you enjoyed what you heard, rate and review us inside your favorite podcasting app. This podcast is written and produced by me, Anna Deshawn, and brought to you by E3 Radio, your #1 queer radio station playing queer music and reporting on queer news in high rotation.